Hi, I'm Bill Roggio from FDD's Long War Journal. You're watching The Rebound with Coach Matt Doherty.
Welcome to The Rebound with Coach Matt Doherty.
Welcome to The Rebound. I am Matt Doherty, and I'll be your host. On this show, we explore remarkable rebound stories of resilience and recovery. We highlight the leadership qualities that emerge in the face of life's toughest challenges, revealing the strength and determination within individuals that inspire us all. With me today is someone that is a prominent military affairs commentator and journalist, known for his extensive work on global conflicts and terrorism. Today's guest is Bill Roggio. He co-founded the Long War Journal, an online publication dedicated to providing detailed reporting and analysis on the global war of terror. Between 2005 and 2008, Bill embedded with the U.S. Marine Corps, the U.S. Army, the Iraqi forces in Iraq, and with the Canadian Army in Afghanistan in 2006. Bill has been recognized as an expert on military affairs and terrorism. Wow, there's a lot there, Bill. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Coach. I appreciate that very kind introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate the invite.
Well, you're very humble. We appreciate that. First question, what motivated you to become an embedded reporter? And how did these experiences influence your perspective on military affairs?
Yeah, this was not my career path, Coach. It was 9/11. I followed Al Qaeda prior to, not long before 9/11, while I was in the U.S. Army in the early 1990s. I recognized that it was something different, that an emerging threat. And it was something I studied on my own. On 9/11, my brother-in-law worked in the second tower. My sister worked a couple blocks away. She was pregnant. I didn't hear from them for, I want to say 16, 18 hours, and was preparing. I live in southern New Jersey, preparing to go up there to find them, and finally get the phone call that they're okay. And it just spurred me I started a blog. That was a thing at the time. I guess they still exist. But it sort of spurred me to start writing about terrorism because friends and family knew that I was sort of a geek about this, so to speak. And so I figured I'd put it online. And that by 2005, I started that in 2003. By 2005, I got invited to do an embed and with the U.S. Marine Corps operating in Western Iraq. The commanders there, they liked my work. I was tracking Al Qaeda's network there and the military campaign against Al Qaeda in Western Iraq in Anbar province. And they invited me to come out, and I was working a full-time job. I had a 1, 3, and 5-year-old at the time. And I just thought, knowing how bad the reporting was, I felt obligated to do it. So I talked to my wife and I said, hey, look, it's a one-time thing. I'm going to try and take a leave of absence and go. And I raised money from people who listen to buy body armor and a plane ticket and a hotel room and whatever else equipment I needed to get out there. I did that embed.
Let me just interrupt. Let me interrupt, Bill, because, I speak for the audience, right? And hopefully I'm in tune with them. But as I'm thinking about, all right, honey, by the way, I'm thinking about like going on a guy's trip to play golf for the weekend. That's hard enough. That's a tough enough ask. You asked to go embed in a war zone overseas, risking your life. You don't have funding. You may never come back. Like, how do you sell that to your wife? What kind of special woman is she?
Yeah. I wouldn't be here without her, Coach. There's just no two ways about it. She's been completely supportive of everything I've done from, making that initial decision to where I'm today. I just can't say enough good things about my wife and how supportive she's been. I think behind every great man or even an average man is a wonderful, beautiful woman. And I've been blessed that she's supportive. It was difficult. It was a difficult decision for me. And it had to be difficult for her. And then the crazy thing is, so that cost me my job where I was working, and it was fine. I figured if they didn't want me there, I didn't want to be there. I struck out on my own. I did, I'm going to say 5 or 6 more embeds in Iraq and one in Afghanistan. And we were struggling, right? I was just living, we were looking in the cabinet. What are we eating today? It looks like we have pasta and sauce. We're going to eat that. And we did that for a couple of years until I got my fellowship. But, to your question about getting out there, seeing the troops, how they work and hearing about how upset they were about reporters. It was just such a huge barrier to me. Once I got in with the units, they figured out I served in the military, so I understood them and was willing to, take on some of their burdens, carry equipment for them or help them in the challenge, do whatever I could, in my free time. It helped build relations, but I also published while I was with those units. I didn't walk away and then publish.
Bill, to educate, the word embed.
Sure.
What does that mean? Define embed. And 2, how does that happen? Do you apply for that? Do they, in this case, they came after you. Why would they come after you? Why do they want reporting? Should reporters be on the front line? I've long felt that they shouldn't, because Americans don't understand war. And once they see, people getting blown up, they immediately want to shut down a war. We sometimes have to go to war. So going back to define embed, and then 2, what is the process of getting one of those opportunities?
Yeah, so an embed is a reporter who literally goes with a military unit, and it could be at several levels. It could be at the high level. You go hang out with a general or a colonel, general who leads a division, or colonel who leads a brigade or a regiment, and you get that high level view. Or you could get all the way down to the squad level, which is what I like to do, walk patrols and, do squad and platoon and company operations. And then I would take the time to sit down with a colonel and a general to get the big picture perspective. Is very important, and my understanding of the military helped me navigate those. In the case of my first embed, they asked me to come. The public affairs officers asked me, and I had no idea how this worked. So I just was able to. I knew someone at the Weekly Standard. They suggested I get my credentials through them, and so you have to be with a credentialed media organization. And so I got so that meant I had to publish with them, not just on my blog at the time, but publish with the Weekly Standard. And that opened the doors. And it was interesting, Coach. Once I developed a reputation, it was really easy for me to get to embed. I even had in 2007, and during the surge, I was with a unit in Baghdad, and I had to cancel one of my embeds and made the unit upset because I couldn't tell them why. I was in country, but I had to halt the embed, and I just told the public affairs officer, look, just we'll be there. I can't tell you why. And I wound up having to do a video teleconference with President Bush from Baghdad. He had a group of military bloggers, which I was considered at the time. And then as soon as I'd done that interview, I could go anywhere I wanted in Iraq. It opened the doors. So building your reputation really made the embed process very easy. You had to get those credentials. You had to show that you were being published, that someone was willing to publish your work. And fortunately, at the time, the military was so upset with the press and the way the reporting was. So I was with this was right before I did that video teleconference. I embedded with a unit that was working with what they called at the time, the Awakening, or the Sons of Iraq. These were the people who were insurgents who turned against Al Qaeda and other terrorist groups in the country, and they were being trained by the U.S. military. And I get there, and the woman the female colonel who led the program, she wanted nothing to do with me. One of the 2 majors, her subordinates, was supportive, and I said to him, I said, "Wow, she doesn't want me here." And he said, "No, she really doesn't." I said, "That's fine." I put my head down. I go with the unit. I'm publishing, and as soon as I come back, I'm walking down the hallway to do the video teleconference. She comes running. I see her coming running down the hall towards me with papers in her hand, and she's holding them and waving. And I'm like, "Oh man, I'm going to get chewed out before I do this call with President Bush." But it was the opposite. She said to me, she said, "Thank you." She said, "You explained what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. You're a voice for us to get some of these problems fixed that we can't get fixed at this level." So that was always my goal. Wow. Was to get the truth out there and not just sit there and be a booster for the military, or not just sit there and tell everyone what the military is doing wrong, but report what's working, what's not working, and give them a voice. And that's what I think every soldier, every commander that I was out there with that they asked of me, and I do hope I did my best to give that. It was, after 9/11, Coach, like I wanted to rejoin the military. I had young kids and I was on a different career, over 30. I wanted to go back in, but I felt that this was, my form of service in a way.
Tell us of a time, you're writing about the truth and you felt compelled to write something that was not well received by maybe a general. Did you ever have that situation occur?
I was critical of the surge because I knew that it wasn't going to work, that it was not resourced properly. The surge under President Obama from 2009 to 2011, he said he was going to pull the plug after a year and a half. He did just that. And what we were put in wasn't going to be enough. I just understood the geography and the terrorist terrain. Understood the Taliban. And as I started reporting on that it wasn't working and why it wasn't working and why negotiating with the Taliban, I just began getting shut out from by the military in Afghanistan. And I only did that reporting to show that this wasn't working and that this could lead to catastrophic failure. It's in one of those instances where you're right, but no one listens because honestly, the policy was leave Afghanistan. And the untold part of that was leave Afghanistan at all costs. And today we have Al-Qaeda running training camps again. They're deeply embedded with the Taliban. It's a terrible situation.
Let's go to break. And when we come back, Bill is going to discuss how our country's military can rebound from the challenges of terrorism. OMJ Clothing is an elite men's clothing store that provides a vast array of spectacular brands of men's lifestyle apparel for every day. Elevate your business upscale casual at OMJ. Success comes from standing out. Bill, welcome back. Tell us how America can rebound from the devastation that we've seen from terrorists, not only foreign, but domestic.
Yeah, this is a great question. The military has a lot of problems right now, but really it stems from our leadership. One of the biggest problems I've witnessed during this entire war on terror, and it's from all four administrations that I've covered this war under, is just the lack of commitment. We failed in Iraq because we were in a hurry to leave and we abandoned a partner. I've done a lot of embeds with Iraqi troops. They were more than willing to fight our enemies because they were their enemies. We cut a deal with the Taliban and immediately left the country. And we operate on terms of election cycles, 2 and 4 years, and our enemies operate in terms of decades and generations. And you can't win a war against an enemy that is committed to its cause, for whatever we think of them, and I despise them, you have to admire their persistence. They have that, and their commitment to their cause, as evil as it is. We need to match that, and until we do, we are lost in this war.
Should we, you hear this, Americans say we shouldn't be overseas. We shouldn't be in Iraq. We shouldn't be fighting in Afghanistan. What say you about that?
Far be it from me to disagree with the American public. That's one of the biggest challenges I've had with, advocating stay in Afghanistan. But if we're not committed to doing it, then we need to figure out, retool our strategy. Maybe, look, I think if anything, Iraq and Afghanistan taught us that, that type of war, we're not geared for it. So we need to figure out a new way of war, how to punish our enemies, but we need to be able to committed to support the allies that are there. For instance, the Afghanistan withdrawal. Okay, fine. The American public and our we failed in Iraq and Afghanistan because our leaders couldn't stand up and explain to the American public on a regular basis why we need to be there. So the American public lose faith and they lose their heart. I mean, how can they not when our leaders have done that? But we do need to be able to support our allies. We had allies in Iraq. We had allies in Afghanistan that we could have supported far better. We could have been more creative. And that's how we're going to have to operate moving forward.
So if you're the president of the United States, we talk about leadership. How would you explain how if you were advising one of the presidents to explain to the American people why we were doing what we were doing, what would you say?
Yeah, I'm not sure I would even go back into the past. I think I would operate, for instance, in Afghanistan, explain Al Qaeda. They've now established a network there that is far beyond what it had prior to 9/11, and that this is a long-term threat. And then I would make the argument that sure, maybe we're not going to occupy Afghanistan again, but we can conduct long-range strikes against Al Qaeda camps, against Taliban leaders that enable it, and we could support. There is viable organized resistance. Find ways to support them to help them regain territory. Those are the type of arguments I would make. I mean, I would admit the failures of the past because you can't learn from them, and you can't correct your mistakes until you admit that failure. That's a key part of leadership, in my estimation. And then
100%.
give a path forward.
100% is admitting mistakes, because what does that do? It makes people trust you. And when somebody denies that they've ever made a mistake or failed, there's a lack of trust. And so the fact that you can own it, saying we made a mistake pulling out of Afghanistan the way we did, we should have done A, B, and C. This is our game plan going forward. People can lean into that because we all make mistakes.
I agree.
Let's talk about leadership on the lower level, if you will. We're talking about presidents. Now let's talk about generals and the boots on the ground. You've witnessed some really special men and women at the leadership level of our military. What qualities or stories can you share that would really, we don't see it. We see it in the movies, but we don't see it. We don't hear the real stories. What have you seen that makes a great military leader?
Yeah, and look, all good military leaders are going to understand tactics and strategy. So that should be a baseline.
That's
But
right.
caring about your troops and doing things for them to keep them in the fight, keep them supplied, explain to them why they're in a difficult situation. Those things really matter. And not get sucked into the political whirlwind that I've watched our generals get sucked in over, particularly over the last decade. Stay away from the politics. What I witnessed, Colonel Stephen Davis in Iraq in the first MBED, that guy should be a general today, but he retired at colonel because he didn't fit the mold of a political general. I've witnessed several commanders like that, at the lieutenant colonel and colonel level. They would be, the next step from a colonel is to become a brigadier general. They cared about their troops. They understood the nature of their enemy. They understood their limitations, and they were tactically and strategically proficient. Those are things that really matter. And also being able to be honest with your superiors about what isn't working. And I go back to, that's why they liked having embedded reporters that could get the truth out there, because sometimes that was the only way. When if they say it to their commanders, the generals might not, roll their eyes, but if they see it in the press, then they starts getting noticed.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, it's human nature, but it's so weird that, as my background's coaching sports. So as a head basketball coach, I could have a non-member of my staff tell me the same thing that a staff member told me, and I will give that more credence than my own staff. I'm admitting that. That's human nature. It's very bizarre, but they get to utilize you to deliver a message that supports what they want to say, and it makes maybe the delivery or that crap sandwich the politician's going to have to eat a little bit more digestible.
Yeah, and one quick thing, trust your subordinates if they've earned your trust. I've seen that far too often, where generals won't listen to their combat commanders, their brigade and regiment and battalion commanders who are voicing concerns and telling them about the problems. That's another key component of a good leader, in my estimation.
I'd like you to just add the story of gaining trust and credibility. I constantly ask, should the media be on the front line? Can we trust what we're getting from the media on the front line? And you told a story about a CNN reporter and comparing it to you. Share that story, if you will.
Sure. I was in Baghdad during the surge. That was when the U.S. pushed, the Bush administration pushed over 100,000 troops into Iraq to defeat Al Qaeda in Iraq. And I'm at the main base. I think it was Camp Liberty in Baghdad. And I'm just a lowly embedded reporter staying in some tent, dingy tent. And then, Anderson Cooper from CNN and his troop rolls in, and they insisted on staying at one of the palaces, one of Saddam's palaces. And I had to hear the PAOs talking about how they were disgusted about having to roll out the red carpet. And, they're, in some cases, I'm getting, soldiers, complaining about this to me. And I'm saying, look, look where I'm staying. I've never asked for anything. I just give me a cot, let me eat, and let me go where I can to tell your story. But it was never that. It was for the big guys. And look, I met a lot of good, the beat reporters in the New York Times or Reuters or other places. They did the dirty work, and I had a lot of respect for them. But a lot of particularly the TV personalities, when they came in, they just left a wake of destruction behind them, with everyone trying to scramble to keep them happy, because the generals want to make them happy so they get good press.
Oh,
and
God.
I understand that, but you shouldn't be a hindrance on the battlefield or even at the command center as a reporter. You should do your best to blend in. And again, it's just all about telling their story and the story of what's happening.
Well, Bill, boy, I could go on and on. What question should I've asked you that I didn't?
Coach, I think you've really hit it. I can't think of anything that you would ask me. I mean, maybe I think one of my, it's interesting. Do you think my greatest success in reporting? And I'll share that with you if you like. And look, I've had a lot of successes. The map that I did on Afghanistan was witnessed by just about the whole world, I'm told. I would get people sending press clippings from Mongolia with the map on it in a language I don't even know exists. But to me, I was always a John Batchelor fan long before I got into this career. He's an excellent radio host. And I would listen to him on the drive to my sister's in Morristown in northern New Jersey. And the second radio show I did was with him, his producer, Lee Mason, who's no longer with us, a beautiful woman, who she contacts me and said, Bill, John would like to have you on the show when you get back. And I listened to John. He would have people on across the world. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll get a hold of a satellite phone and I'll give you interviews from Ramadi and Fallujah and all over Western Iraq. And I did the shows, and I've been a regular on his show ever since. And now, in the last year, I've been co-hosting a couple of segments with him on the radio. So I've done a lot of reporting things that I could just go on and on about. But that to me, and John's a great friend of mine too, and been a mentor. And that to me is just my greatest achievement.
It's awesome. Question: how do people find you on the air? How do they follow you? And especially on the Long War Journal.
Sure. You can go on the website. You can go to longwarjournal.org. All our articles are free. You could read them. I have a great group of writers at Foundation for Defense of Democracies and elsewhere that contribute. You can follow me on Twitter at Bill Roggio, Roggio. And if you want to hear me on the John Batchelor Show, I think I'm on Monday nights. You can catch me there. He is, he's on CBS Eye on the World Radio.
Bill, thank you for joining us today on The Rebound.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure talking with you, Coach.
Leadership is a learned behavior. We all lead in some way, shape, or form. We all deal with adversity. And when you do, I challenge you to rebound. I challenge you to learn and grow. If you'd like to contact me about executive coaching or giving a keynote talk, you can reach me at dohertycoaching.com. That's DOHERTY coaching.com. Thanks for tuning in.